The concept of the avant-garde had been established in the history of art for 50 years before Jackson Pollock. It means to go into battle first, before anyone else. And artists really wanted to redefine art, to go into battle first. Every artist wanted to find that thing that no one had ever done before. And Pollock came and did something that no one had ever done before. Pollock transformed the way people recognize art and its creation. As Willem de Kooning put it, Jackson broke the ice. Before Jackson Pollock's turning point in abstract art, representational artists depicted murals and scenes that could easily be related to and understood. For example, Gustave Courbet, Vincent van Gogh, Edward Munch, Claude Monet, and Pollock's mentor, Tom Benton, all painted realistically. Even Pollock created realistic art when he was making sponsored artworks in the Works Progress Association in the 1930s. Art was extremely realistic and easy to understand. During World War II, Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, and Franco were promoting a very realistic art. This made representational imagery problematic for the Western artists after the war, and they did not want to create an artwork that may be associated with the enemy powers, therefore being rejected by the public.
After the 1930s, and after World War II more specifically, no artist wanted to really touch representational imagery because it was aligned with Nazi art, for example.
After the war, artists were reintroducing abstraction, which had occurred a couple decades earlier in Europe. ABC-CLIO defines the abstract expressionist movement as one that represents one of the most important American contributions to modern art. Abstract expressionism was enigmatic compared to prior representations and attempted to create an immediate reaction from the art viewer. In addition, from the war influencing it, abstract expressionism was America's response to European modernism, such as Dada, Fauvism, Cubism, and Surrealism, and more local styles like social realism and American scene painting. The reasons for the existence of abstract expressionism are unrelated to Pollock. The movement would have still occurred had he not influenced it. But even though it would have still come about, it would have been on a much smaller scale in terms of popularity and the public reacting to it. Pollock made the movement's fame, and without it, art would not have changed as profoundly.
I don't think that movement would have been popular without Pollock. And it wouldn't be something that maybe we even, that I even teach in my art history class today. I mean, who knows?
Pollock was renowned for a number of reasons. He posed the opposite appearance of the stereotypical artist by wearing workers' boots, jeans, his signature white t-shirt, and smoking his Marlboro cigarettes. All this portrayed him as the average worker that people could really relate to.
I like to call it a costume, really, that he wore.
Pollock's champion critic, Clement Greenberg, sustained a shower of praise for Pollock's works. A mere few of his compliments were that Pollock was the strongest painter of his generation, a superb painter, one of the major painters of our time. Greenberg even professed Jackson was the greatest painter this country has produced.
Pollock was extraordinary.
Consequent to Greenberg's commendations, Life magazine featured an article on Pollock entitled, "Is he the greatest living painter in the United States?" A portion of it reads, Pollock was virtually unknown in 1944. Now his paintings hang in 5 U.S. museums and 40 private collections. Exhibiting in New York last winter, he sold 12 out of 18 pictures. Moreover, his work has stirred up a fuss in Italy, and this autumn he is slated for a one-man show in avant-garde Paris, where he is fast becoming the most talked of and controversial U.S. painter. This fame and new reputation allowed his new art style and creation to spread like wildfire throughout not only the nation, but also Europe. But what change actually occurred? Before Pollock's drip painting in the movement, and even after, most abstract art was still geometric and had a focal point. Late 1930s, early 1940s modern art was still rigid and planned abstractions. The abstract art being created wasn't fully abstract.
Think about it, the 1950s were kind of the space wars. We want to be in space first, and he wants to, reach pure abstraction first.
Pollock created complete abstraction in his paintings. Critic Bruno Alfieri commented that this is essential. Jackson Pollock's paintings represent absolutely nothing. No facts, no ideas, no geometrical forms. Another critic wrote that his artworks resemble nothing so much as a mop or tangled hair. I have an irresistible urge to comb out. Before Jackson Pollock, the process of making abstract art was still that of traditional methods. Painters still controlled their works with brushstrokes on the canvas and worked with easels. The artist was still conscious when painting. The way artists made the artwork still didn't matter too much.
I usually paint on the floor. This way I can walk around the canvas, work from all four sides, and be in the painting. Sometimes I use a brush, but often prefer using a stick. Sometimes I pour the paint straight out of the can. I want to express my feelings rather than illustrate them.
When Hans Nemuth was able to capture Pollock drip painting and release it in his film entitled Jackson Pollock, the creation of art was changed instantly.
And that really opened the door in the art world to artists that will come later in the mid-1950s, early 1960s, that were just called performance artists.
He made the act of creating the artwork part of the art, and by accomplishing that, Pollock forced critics to talk about the way he constructed the art.
And this was extremely influential in art history, to think about the act of making an artwork, that it becomes kind of a performance, that he's kind of dancing around. He was a drummer, and so that sort of drumming comes into the way he's applying the paint.
Willem de Kooning, another abstract expressionist, uniquely described what Pollock accomplished. Every so often, a painter has to destroy painting. Cezanne did it. Picasso did it with Cubism. Then Pollock did it. He busted our idea of a picture all to hell. Then there could be new paintings again. Influenced by Pollock, Kooning decided to create his first black and white abstract art. Others were also influenced. Helen Frankenthaler and Morris Louis adapted Pollock's paint-pouring method into their color-field paintings. Frank Stella and Robert Morris made Pollock's all-over composition the signature of the minimal art movement. Sculptors Eva Hesse and Richard Serra, in addition to performing artists Alan Capro and Jim Dine, developed Pollock's emphasis on the act of creating art.
Jim Dine made a painting, an artwork.
Jim Dine performed an act of making his art before selling it. This particular act was called The Smiling Workman. Dine dressed up and painted, "I love what I'm doing, help," on the canvas. He drank the red paint, which was actually tomato juice, and at the end of the act he poured all of the paint over his head and leapt through the painting, supposedly making him and the painting one.
That, I think, is, in terms of art history, as an art historian, that was pretty important, because it kind of labeled the act of making art, not just the final product, the painting art.
Jackson Pollock caused people to view art differently and to realize the creation of artwork could be part of the art. Before Pollock's turning point in art, the vast majority of art was realistic and representational. Abstract art before him still used conventional methods of creating art. When Pollock stepped into the art scene in the late 1940s and early 1950s, he brought a whole new foreign style to the table and prompted the turning point that allowed the act of creating the art piece to be a part of the art. Pollock transformed the way people recognize art and its creation. Without his presence in abstract expressionism, the movement would have likely had a negligible influence. In this turning point in art history, Jackson Pollock was the reason art is viewed differently.